You got to serve somebody, and if it's the dollar bill, you have chosen a very low position in the universe.
I think we need to get back to those foundational issues of bodily sovereignty, individual rights, freedom that is so viciously, egregiously being attacked by all governments around the world, but especially our federal government here in Canada.
It is a hallelujah moment seeing this long overdue revocation of hepatitis B from the childhood schedule in the USA. And may it be the first of many as we go back to science and human rights.
We have the same population as the state of California, and yet we have 10 times the amount of medically assisted dying in Canada than in California. So there's something terribly wrong in this country.
Loving someone and being in love is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it's at the basic substrate of human society, and that's one of the reasons they want to destroy it, because they want to get rid of all organic organization so we can be reorganized like a bunch of rats in an AI-run cage.
Well, friends, welcome to Wins of the Week. This is episode 102 for the wins ending December the 6th, 2025. Mark, we got a couple weeks to go before Christmas, but boy, I think we got a lot of Christmas presents this week, particularly out of BC and Alberta. And so looking forward to sharing the good news that comes out of the big surprise is what's coming out of BC.
Oh, it really is. It's amazing to see some, amazing people actually in the BC legislature of all places. I really want to send them crosses, mirrors, garlic, just to make sure they're safe there.
Yeah.
But Ted, there's big gifts to folks in Alberta this week from the UCP convention. Now, can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Well, my understanding is that I mean, first of all, there's a huge crowd there. I watched some of the video clips, so it's nice to see that level of public engagement in a democratic process. But they reviewed 36 policies that were shortlisted, I think, from 500 recommendations that they had for the AGM to consider, and 35 of the 36 policy recommendations passed. And there's some pretty key ones that were in there, things around vaccine mandates and that kind of stuff, getting rid of those things. But there was an important win on fluoridation. There's a couple of real warriors there, including Dr. Bob Dixon. They had put forward a policy to end fluoridation in the entire province of Alberta, and that passed overwhelmingly, I think 85 or 87%. So encouraged by that. But yeah, we had somebody this morning, Mark, that was running through some of the policies, and just to have those conversations, because they're conversations that don't seem to happen in the rest of the country here. Now, the government is not obligated to follow these recommendations, but they would lose their support of their party members if they didn't. So, and the other thing that I learned is that you don't have to wait 4 years to get the results. Every year they hold a meeting and they review the policy recommendations, and then the government is held to account about where are you at with this, what have you done, how have you moved this forward. And so there really is a mechanism, at least with the United Conservative Party of Alberta, of accountability, which I'm not aware of in any other province or at the federal level. So I have to say I was pretty impressed.
Well, yes, and we spoke with the good Dr. Bob Dixon. Of course, he's passionate about raising children's intelligence for life by getting the neurotoxin fluoride out of the water, and he was very pleased with what happened at the UCP. So,
Well,
Ted, there's some other. Oh,
Mark,
sorry,
if
go
I
ahead.
can, yeah, if I can just wade in there, what they talked about is that the policy was not based upon the neurotoxicity of fluoride, because they felt like that would just wade into our expert versus your expert, and then there would be a call for more evidence and all that kind of stuff. They came from the perspective, which I really liked, is they just said the bodily sovereignty is that you're providing a medical treatment without informed consent. I do not consent, and get it out of my water supply. And that argument is what made the difference. So I think that was a great argument. I think we need to get back to those foundational issues of bodily sovereignty, individual rights, freedom that is so viciously, egregiously being attacked by all governments around the world, but especially our federal government here in Canada.
That's a really good point, Ted, because we can get weighed into these scientific debates about whether or not there's scientific justification to invade people's rights and, body
Yeah.
snatch them essentially. And, just as a reminder, we brought out a call to action last week, but it's still on the books, folks. Still, there's pressure needs to be applied to Florida lawmakers to start supporting the draft that Dr. Ladapo and others are trying to put together instead of obstructing it. And we see you and we know what you're up to, and you've got to stop because you will be held accountable. Ted, there's some other great news that folks probably weren't aware of. It's great news for folks out in Alberta, specifically folks in Calgary. I think, Ted, you probably share my sentiment that one of my great Canadian heroes of the medical realm is Dr. Roshane Killian.
Mhm.
I'm very honored. In 2021, she and I were mocked by the murderous media for claiming that the COVID vaccines were actually genetic experiments, which of course they were. And so Dr. Killian, Dr. Roshane Killian, this amazing young physician with a great mind, she's not only served very well as an emergency doctor, but she has a very strong vision of what health looks like. And she's got a very strong vision to get away from just putting band-aids on symptoms and trying to restore people's health at a deep level. In any event, she was, of course, stripped of her Ontario license, as was a long, so a significant list of Canadian heroes. And she's relocated out to Calgary. And she is now opening I guess, a health coaching and therapeutics clinic in Calgary. And she's going to treat all ages and sexes. This includes athletes. She's treating with chronic pain clients, individuals with complex functional issues. She's diving into structural and fascial work as well as bioenergetic support. And as I'm very aware from previous conversations, interaction with her, she'll be really helping coach people to establish health rather than just bounce off the disease floor. And so Killian Wellness, KILIAN wellness.ca is where you can get tapped in and book your appointment out there in Calgary with the great Dr. Roshane Killian. Ted, we've got a big list to jump into, but I would love to just share a few things from last week's comments from our readers. So, John Alton, who is a regular great commenter, thanks, John. You commented regarding Dr. Prasad's letter that he had penned and that he would be presenting to the AICP. And as you will see, John, you have triggered the story, and we will be covering what happened with that this week. Also, I thought this was a very profound sharing from AB Girl, and she described that her retired police friend concluded, quote, that the police force is now used to control the public and protect the elites. And that became very obvious through the COVID operation. I want to give a shout out to Roland Marie Ross, whose comments on Bob Marley. Once again, we definitely share some musical taste. And she talked about how Bob Marley saw the tyranny at such a young age. And she mentioned thanking God for people like Vince Guerzi. I think you and I both join in that. And she inspired us all to all keep up the fight whatever way we can. So everybody, whether you got one legs or two, one eye or two, or a bunch of money or no money at all, I'm amazed how people that are motivated find a way to really add to the fight, war for the world and winning things back for humanity. As well, Hillary Sellon, it turns out Hillary works out every week to Wins of the Week. So she said, thank you, gentlemen. I put your show on when I do my weights. That way I get stronger in spirit, soul, and body all at once. God bless you. Keep up the good works. And
Oh,
by the
that's
way, she also finally looked up what Turtle Island means. And of course, we're transmitting from the northern half of Turtle Island as we speak. So thanks, Hillary. Thanks to everyone who commented. There's a lot of great comments there, folks. I recommend diving in there. Oh, I wanted to mention a comment from Beathead, because last week, Ted, you and I were celebrating the move in Alberta law to create a system that had public and private health care and that physicians could move between the two. And we were celebrating it as predominantly a win. But I think Beathead raises some very good counterpoints. And I like them not only because they're intelligent counterpoints, but because we believe that the truth is a process rather than a destination. So, folks, I'd recommend having a look at what Beadhead wrote with some, different perspectives on how privatization of healthcare in Alberta might be a negative thing. And I think it's important to consider those. So, anyways, that's just a little bit from our comment section from last week. Thanks, friends, for commenting. Thank you very much, friends. If you're enjoying the wins of the week, grateful if you press the like button, share it with others, choose a paid subscription if you can. And for paid subscribers, access to all the links so you can load your guns up with every item out of the wins of the week for your own activism. And you can check down the sources and as well get involved in a really interesting dialogue that I enjoy every week in our comments section.
Okay, should we get started? We got lots of
We got a long list. I guess we better, eh?
yeah, good ones in the political realm. So just happened this week in here in British Columbia, the leader of the Conservative Party of BC, John Rustad, has been removed as party leader, and an interim leader has been chosen. A majority of party members, in quotes, no longer has confidence in Rustad and considers him professionally incapacitated and thus unable to continue serving as party chief under the party constitution. Surrey White Rock MLA Trevor Halford has been selected as interim leader per a caucus vote. Mark, this is really an interesting move, and I understand that Rustad was resisting being removed, but has finally stepped down. My frustration with Rustad goes back to pre-election when good people like Dr. Stephen Malthouse and Nurse Jan Webb were accepted to run in their constituents as Conservative Party members, and then were removed literally within hours of having been accepted because, somehow, in my view, because Rustad was unwilling to stand up to the criticism that was being launched by NDP and others because they didn't follow the COVID narrative as it unfolded. And so I'm not sad to see Rustad go. I think that he didn't stand up for the things that at least that I value. So those are my thoughts.
Well, I agree with that, Ted. I recall that very well. Steve Malthouse is clearly one of the doctors in this country who led the exposure of the truth about COVID and the jabs and did so much. I worked with him in teams. I have great respect for him. And when he was running, that to me brought a lot of legitimacy to the Conservative Party of BC. And then remind me also, there was a nurse who was another great
Yeah,
hero out in
Jan
BC,
Webb. Yeah.
Jan Webb. So, when I saw those people running, I was like, great, we're going to get behind this. And then I saw them stepping down at his request. And to me, it was a typical, hey, the Conservative Party could win the election if we just became another WEF-controlled Liberal Party. So I'm glad to see John Rustad go. I think BC's better off with a real Conservative Party rather than a fake one. And speaking of a real Conservative Party out in BC, Ted, we've got some amazing stuff coming from two MLAs, Dallas Brody and Tara Armstrong
Yeah.
of one BC party. So if maybe I could kick in with this one from Dallas Brody, she introduced legislation to ban non-domestic government flags at public buildings in British Columbia. That makes sense. I mean, wouldn't the government have its flag? Anyways, during the November BC Legislative Assembly, Brody tabled Public Flags Display Act, which would prohibit flying non-domestic government flags at public buildings. And to quote, after years of anti-Canadian rhetoric and the tearing down of our proud heritage and national excellence, the Canadian flag and the BC flag are now regularly removed and replaced throughout the year with flags that champion certain ideologies and foreign nations. If you want to preserve a nation, you start by preserving its icons and its symbols, which is the very essence of its heritage. Dallas Brody, we agree. Ted, you're out there from BC. What are your sentiments on this?
Well, I really like the work that Dallas Brody and Tara Armstrong are doing. These are two fire plugs, and they really show what good politicians can do because they're the only two members of this party, but they seem to be doing more than the entire rest of the legislature combined. Now, this proposed legislation never got past first reading, of course, because all of the liberals and NDPers in the BC government quickly shot it down. But what I like is that One BC is bringing forward some really important proposed private members' bills. And we're going to hear from a few of them in our wins of the week today.
Yeah, and we're going to have some pretty good laughs on the next item because this brings in Tara Armstrong, the other one BC candidate. So check this out, folks. British Columbia's Education Minister, Lisa Bear, was asked about a report in the National Post detailing a broad curriculum on how to queer outdoor education from kindergarten to grade 12. So during question period in the BC legislature on November 27th, one BC MLA Tara Armstrong read aloud from the article. And I'm going to read what she read now. What happens when left-wing fanatics take over the union representing the province's teachers? She said, you get queering outdoor education. That's in quote, queering outdoor education. That's their plan. The latest module made by the BC Teachers Federation for kindergarten students. Oh my God, they want to take your kid outside and queer them and call that outdoor ed. Anyways, to continue the quote from what she was reading, the birds and the bees are racist now. Does the minister agree that kids should be queering the outdoors? Parents have no idea that their children are being taught this poisonous drivel, and activists are furious when it is quoted to them precisely because they do not know how to defend it without defaulting to faux outrage. So, anyways, Bear, rather than answer the question, she defaulted to insisting that Armstrong was risking the lives of suicidal, self-harming children. What a defense. Wait, if we don't teach kids to be homosexuals in kindergarten out in the bush, that's going to cause suicidal, self-harming. Oh, Ted. Anyways, I'm kind of already on a rant on this one, other than admiration for Tara Armstrong.
Well, again,
Uh,
like I said, the BC parties or the one BC party is just poking away at this government, and there's so much to poke away at. And, the childish kind of response where this education minister really went into a bit of a temper tantrum, tears and all. And it's like, no, just to answer the question, why do you think it's a good idea to queer outdoor education for our kindergarten students? But of course, they don't like to be held to account. Our democracy is not what we think it is. Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you. And just to add to that, this education minister, Lisa Bear, and here she is saying that if you can't ram this LGBTQXRW agenda down the throats of little children,
Yeah.
and she's claiming you're risking the lives of suicidal, self-harming children. Listen, Bear, you take kids on the autistic spectrum who are more than normally vulnerable to this type of agenda, and they end up entering your gender bending program and on hormones, and eventually they have surgery and they have a phenomenal suicide rate. So you're the one who's a risk to kids. And God bless 1BC. God bless Tara Armstrong. Let's make sure we have a photo of Tara Armstrong. And you know what's interesting about Tara Armstrong and Dallas Brody as well? I mean, you can't judge a book by its cover, but sometimes when I look at these radical groups, like when I look at the legal team of the College of Physicians and Surgeons, it looks like a scene from the Addams Family, but not a comic one. You're like, what is wrong with these people? They're all in black and they all like they got these mean looks on their face. So, anyways, what's interesting is Tara Armstrong and Dallas Brody, I hope they had children and lots of them because these are beautiful, good-looking, intelligent women.
The Addams Family. That's good. I like that one.
Oh, you got, I mean, friends, let's put up some pictures of some of these college boards, and you swear it's the non-comical version of the
Yeah.
Addams Family. But anyways, we've got something else good from 1BC, don't we, Ted?
Well, Dallas Brody narrated a production that was done by the One BC Party where it exposes the reconciliation industry, particularly in BC here, but across all of Canada. And so the title is Making a Killing, Reconciliation, Genocide, and the Plunder of Canada. And it's about an hour and 20 minutes. I watched it just the other night. I was very impressed with it. I can see how this is going to make the BC government and many Native chiefs right across the country uncomfortable because it's exposing what appears to be a huge money laundering scheme. And it's more than money now in various parts of Canada. They just started in Haida Gwaii and then Richmond, BC, is how all of a sudden the land doesn't belong to the people any longer. It belongs to these native tribes. Anyways, this is a very well done documentary. I would encourage everybody to watch it. And one of the actions of the week that we're asking people to do is to not only watch it, but to share it. But yeah, this was a win for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great to see. And I think one of the things that has to be highlighted on that subject, Ted, is we see super corruption in old world provincial governments, super corruption in old world federal governments. They're by no means representing the people. They're ripping off the people and abusing the people. Folks, these a lot of these native governments, it's the same deal.
Yeah,
Tons of money will flow into a tribe, and guess who doesn't get it? The kids, the people.
yeah.
They don't get clean drinking water. And it's like, well, give them more money, and then more money goes to, more corruption. So it's so important that all of us, whether you consider yourself indigenous or you consider yourself descendant of immigrants, come together right now
Yeah.
because they're trying to take advantage of all of us. It seems to be a big week for the truth on this matter. And
Yeah.
that's what matters is the truth. If the truth was that there were football fields full of dead kids buried behind, we'd want to know and we'd act on it. But we want to act on the truth rather than act on emotions conjured up with lies. So, anyways, dead wrong. How Canada got the residential school story so wrong is the just published sequel to the book Grave Error. And this was edited by Chris Champion and Tom Flanagan. It's got chapters written by knowledgeable academics, journalists, researchers, even several contributors who once worked directly in residential schools or dedicated hospitals. So, Dead Wrong was published because the struggle for accurate information on this contentious subject continues. As the proponents of the Kamloops narrative failed to provide convincing hard evidence for it, they hope to mobilize the authority of the state to stamp out dissent. One of the main goals behind publication of Dead Wrong is to head off this drive towards authoritarianism.
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly important book. And after I saw the documentary that we just talked about, you realize that there is something very wrong with this whole situation. And there's lots of interviews in the documentary and in this book from people that were directly involved in native bands in this whole area of reconciliation. And there's a problem here. Like I said, I think this is a huge money laundering scheme and it needs to be exposed. And so I've got this book on my Christmas list that I'm hoping Santa will bring me this year.
Well, Ted, is there something bringing unelected Carnage Carney into this situation?
Well, somebody sent me a message this week with a newspaper clipping to confirm it, and they indicated that Mark Carney's father was a principal of an Indian residential school. Boy, I've never seen that announced anywhere. So if that's true, and what they sent me appears to be legitimate, it was a copy of an old newspaper where Carney's father was being acknowledged for his role as principal. I find it interesting that that's never publicly acknowledged by a Mr. Prime Minister or anybody in the Liberal Party for that matter.
That's interesting. We'll have to try to track down more information about that. And it's certainly interesting out there in BC. You get some of these interesting things happening. Some folks may be aware of some of the interesting prior residences of Justin Trudeau, close to a very famous agricultural institution, shall we say. We won't go into that one today, but there's something for folks to look into. But, you know, Ted, this Klaus Schwab, I think, ordered Justin Trudeau to appoint Mark Carney as the Prime Minister of the Corporation of Canada. And I don't think for no reason at all. And as much as we kind of can laugh at these people, there's an issue of how dangerous they are. And this week another revelation came out, and I'm going to put a link below. So Robin Hillier made a very concise video which appears to, in quite high-speed detail, reveal Mark Carney's massive con job. And this is intricately prepared maneuvers over years that Hillier describes and details, essentially to rip off all Canadians, including pension funds, and basically leave Canadians broke and enslaved while
Wow.
he dances away a millionaire. And when I looked at it, I just said, "Oh my God, this is truly arch criminal stuff." So, folks, you might want to have a look at that little story. You can find it just reposted on X on Dr. Trozy. If you go to Dr. Trozy on X, you can find that as well.
Not a surprise. Not a surprise. I'd be surprised if they were honest and transparent. That's what I would be surprised about.
Yeah. Well, the
Mark,
gold store going to 1BC continues. We've got another story out of BC to share. What's this one, Ted?
well, and I actually think this is the best win of the week here. So, in a bold move, 1BC MLA Tara Armstrong introduced the Freedom Convoy Recognition Act. And this proposed bill proposes that March 11th be recognized as a statutory holiday in British Columbia. Armstrong said March 11th marks a turning point in BC's recent history. It's the day in 2022 when provincial COVID mandates began to lift, including mask requirements and gathering restrictions. Armstrong calls it a moment of healing, recovery, and democratic renewal. And she added, this day, if formally adopted, would be the first statutory holiday in Canada to recognize peaceful civil resistance against government overreach and to honor the legacy of every trucker, nurse, doctor, parent, pastor, and citizen who took a stand for freedom of choice, bodily sovereignty, and democratic consent. Now, the real win was that the bill passed first reading with an overwhelming 87 to 2 support. That's a shock given how left wing is the BC government out here. And the only two that opposed were the Green Party candidates, which I thought was very curious. Anyways, I think this is a fabulous suggestion to have a Freedom Convoy Recognition Day. I think it should be part of history. I've said that if this time in history is properly documented, that the Freedom Convoy will be one of the most important events in Canadian history.
Well, I agree with you, Ted. And that is incredible that in the BC legislature, 87 out of 89 members voted to pass this bill through its first reading. Ted, that shows me some hope. That makes me want to just kind of reach out to all those MLAs, whatever little party or whatever labels and stickers you put on your bumper, whatever it is you identify as. There is a path to redemption, and recognizing the Canadian struggle for freedom and rights and health and a future for our children, and the reality that the Freedom Convoy is a major historic move. And, folks, if you continue the process, we will not be alone. We will be joining many other countries that celebrate things like that, including India, where great freedom fighter, a lot like Tamara Lich and Chris Barber, Mahatma Gandhi, who stood for human rights, who served time in prison, who gave up personal wealth and possessions to pursue a higher future for mankind. And guess what? Gandhi Jayanti Day is October 2nd, his birthday. So I'm happy to see this go forward, Ted. And it makes me really think about hugging some folks at the BC legislature that I might never thought we would.
Now, mark that this isn't done yet. So this is first
No.
reading. It's got to go through three readings. And my understanding is the legislature is closed for winter recess, and so they won't come back till February. And so there's going to be a strategy planning session about how people can engage the members of the BC legislature to invite them to support this bill to its final conclusion. In the short term, I've already written emailed Tara Armstrong thanking her for bringing this forward. But there needs to be a much bigger strategy about engaging all MLAs in British Columbia. So I'm sure that as that comes together, we'll share that as an action of the week.
We definitely will. We'll bring that to you, folks. Well, more good news from the Western half, and again from Alberta. Alberta's Justice Minister, his last name is Amory. So Justice Minister Amory was emphatic at the 2025 UCP AGM that we were discussing earlier when he said that Alberta can expect to see protections for minors from MAID in the spring. And folks around the world, MAID is medical assistance in dying. And Canada is leading the way by far. The Canadian government is murdering more people through the medical military industrial complex. Even with our 1/10 of the population, we're outscoring the US and every country in the world. But anyways, so looks like Alberta's thinking about maybe protecting kids from being suicided by the government. Well, that's great. So his office released the following statement, and we now quote from Justice Minister Amory. The Alberta government's goal is to build a continuum of care where vulnerable Albertans can live in long-term health and fulfillment. The current federal framework for medical assistance in dying under the criminal code is insufficient in providing the necessary oversights and safeguards to protect vulnerable Canadians, including minors. Now, Ted, it's shocking that we even have to talk about
Yeah,
making
yeah.
laws so the government doesn't kill kids. But I'd just love to hear your comments on this and where you think the justice minister's going.
Well, first of all, you said it is that Canada is leading the way in the amount of medically assisted dying in this country. At the NCI hearings in Brandon, Manitoba that we just completed, Dr. William Mack has provided evidence of how Canada compares with other countries. And I think I've mentioned this before, as all countries, there's a gradual increase over the last 10 years of medically assisted dying. But the Canadian graph looks like almost a vertical line, like it is just, a rocket ship taking off. And we have the same population as the state of California, and yet we have 10 times the amount of medically assisted dying in Canada than in California. So there's something terribly wrong in this country. And the federal government is looking at reducing the age of which medically assisted dying can apply to children under the age of 16. And they've even indicated, and they've used the same tactic with vaccination, that under the mature minor doctrine, that there are minors who are mature enough to make their own medical decisions. And so, the big fear is, and it's not an unrealistic fear, is that parents will get a little notice to say, oh, your 14-year-old decided to accept medically assisted in dying, and here are the ashes. We might think that that is a stretch. I don't think it is a stretch. I actually think we need to be very vigilant here, and I'm glad to see that the Alberta Justice Minister recognizes the threat, particularly to our minors.
I agree with you 100%, Ted. And we've got some more good news out of Alberta because we have details of Alberta's plans to oppose the federal firearms seizure program. And folks, Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Castro, Chavez, all authoritarians know you got to get rid of religion because if people have their own thoughts, you can't control them. And you got to get rid of the guns so they have no way to defend themselves against your tyranny. So, details of Alberta's plan to oppose the federal firearms seizure program. This is the WEF government of the Corporation of Canada's plan to do the same old take away the guns. So, this was released in an order paper on December 2nd, with the provincial government saying firearms ownership falls under its jurisdiction through the Alberta Firearms Act, not federal jurisdiction, which empowers the government to control firearms seizures activity. So, under the proposed motion, provincial entities would be forbidden to take part in enforcing the federal program. The motion says the position of the provincial government is that it will not assist in any way with the federal firearms seizure initiative, which it said will unjustifiably interfere with the rights of law abiding Alberta firearms owners and violate the jurisdiction of the Alberta legislature. So the motion adds that all reasonable steps would be taken to ensure neither the government nor any provincial entity participate in the implementation or enforcement of this Ottawa program. It also says the buyback program is unconstitutional. This is a program that says you got to give us your guns and we're going to buy them back. Here's a little bit of money, and then probably send some young kid in Ukraine out to get himself killed fighting a Russian soldier. Anyways, Armory also said that the province will instruct prosecutors not to pursue cases in which people defend themselves against home intruders. Oh my God, the right to self-defense. Is this ever different than Ontario?
Yeah.
The Ontario Provincial Police has also said it will not participate in the enforcement of the buyback program. Well, OPP friends, well done to you too.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining the movement. Ted, what are your thoughts about this right to bear arms business in Turtle Island?
Well, you know what, Mark? I mean, throughout most of my life, I really didn't have any fondness for firearms, and I didn't understand people's need to own a gun. But boy, after seeing what's happened over the last 5 years, I have switched completely, and I just think that if citizens can't protect themselves from their governments, then they're open to tyranny. And that's what we've got here in Canada. And that's what this whole plan is about seizing firearms is to make citizens defenseless. I realize that, it should be in our Constitution, like it is in the US Constitution, the right to bear arms. Because if you can't hold the government to account, if you can't defend yourself, you very quickly become a victim of tyranny. So I'm very pleased to see what Alberta is doing here. Good for them.
Yeah, yeah. And Ted, this restoration of the right to self-defense and to empower yourself to defend yourself and your family couldn't come at a more important time because of the grotesque demonstration we've had in the recent months. Folks are familiar with the story of an Ontario man who woke up in his bedroom. He had no gun, he had no arms. There was a man armed with a crossbow and two other men, I believe, in the house robbing his house. So imagine waking up in your bedroom. There's a man with a crossbow. Now, folks, you can kill a bear with a crossbow, and it's pretty quiet. So it's not a benign thing to be in somebody's bedroom at night, having climbed in their window with a crossbow, robbing their stuff. And this valiant Ontario man actually managed to like physically grab the guy and fight with him and defend himself and actually succumb the guy and called the police. And the police came and arrested the armed man who'd broken into his house to rob him and threaten his life. But strangely, they arrested him as well and were asking for a harsher sentence for the man defending himself than the violent intruder with the weapon. So there's such a strong need for reform on this issue. And I
Yeah.
think it also has to be reform in your heart. If somebody's getting ready to kill you or your kids, are you going to call somebody on the phone and say, I'm just wondering, am I, oh, sorry, I missed one. I got one more kid left here. Have I got a right to defend? You got a God-given right to defend yourself. You
Yeah.
have a duty to defend yourself. And that goes back to the foundations of the law. So it's great to see some moves in Alberta and even from the OPP
Yeah.
to catch up with God on this issue. And I'm sure friends of all different versions of Godism from Christianity to Muslim would agree with that. So,
Agreed. And then the last item we have here under this category under what are we still doing politics? Holy jeez, we are.
it's been a good one. Number 10.
Number 10. So in the UK, the Cornwall Council has become the first local authority in the UK to oppose the UK government's efforts to introduce a mandatory digital ID. The leader of the council said he was willing to march to London as one of 20,000 Cornishmen on the matter. Conservative councillor Connor Donnythorne told a meeting of the full council, "It may sound modern, it might sound innovative, and it might sound efficient. It sounds inevitable, and that's exactly why we should be skeptical of it. Convenience must never come at the cost of personal liberty." And he said residents across Cornwall were rightly expressing genuine concern about the move. And then he added, it's about the individual being in control of their identity, not the state. And Green Party councillor Drew Creek, sounds like they've got a better Green Party than we've got here in Canada, added that the mandatory digital ID plan was fundamentally against British values. Good for them.
Amen to that. Well done, Cornwall. You
Yeah.
Brits are showing us the way. Well, Ted, we got a cool item under citizen action. And this is coming from the good old USA in the southern half of Turtle Island. 17 states in the United States reported increases in homeschooling this year. Folks are taking back their kids' right and opportunity to be smart and
Yeah.
not agendized. Anyways, North Carolina now has over
Wow.
165,000 homeschooled kids. Georgia has near 90,000. Virginia jumped from 53,680 to 56,000 in just this one year. So, Ted, parents are figuring it out. Schools are unfortunately systems of indoctrination more so than education.
Yep, that's pretty encouraging. Nice to see parents are
Yeah,
taking more responsibility for the education of their kids and recognizing that schools are no longer safe places.
yeah. And folks wanting to look at that issue, the last four national citizens inquiry have been on the
Mm.
subject of are children safe in Canada? And there is abundant evidence of the danger of just sending your kid to school. Not just the danger that they're going to get injected with some kind of genetic poison that will sterilize and slowly kill them. You know, not just the danger that they're not going to learn how to do cursive writing or long division, not just the danger that they're going to be exposed to some completely insane version of his story claiming that it's history, but the danger that they're going to be indoctrinated to the point where they're completely incapable of growing up into fully functional adults. So I'll sure be looking for homeschooling families, kids to hang out and play with my kids and grandkids.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for reminding people of the testimony at the NCI. That was some of the most disturbing testimony is what schools teachers are teaching our kids down to, kindergarten and grade one kid about sexuality, asking them every day, do you feel like a boy today? I feel like a girl today. And at the last hearings in Brandon, Manitoba, we had a former school principal share with us the PowerPoint presentation he was required by the school district to present to all of his teaching staff at his school. And it just talked about how, they're supposed to embrace this gender confusion ideology, how they're supposed to lie to parents, how they're supposed to use pronouns of what the kids want and make sure that they don't leak that information to the parents. Like it was absolutely disgusting. But he walked through the documentation like this was not made up, this was not somebody's opinion. He walked through the formal documents that were required by the Minister of Education and school trustees in the area that he worked in. So the threat is real.
And it's so obvious, folks. All you have to do is walk in the door of a public school. You should see it.
Yeah.
One of my good friends recently visited a school in Ontario. I'm not going to be too specific, where an old, basically school friend of ours was holding an administrative role. And he went by and visited on the weekend, and they were at the school. And just walking into the entranceway, it was just sexual perversion city everywhere. All over the walls was like, come on and change your gender. Come on and join in bestiality and all this
Yeah.
nonsense that we've been reporting, not because we like it, because it's real. And, the friend who was the administrator said, I know, is it sick, isn't it? I just got to put in another year to retire. I don't know how they get people to go along with that. I guess it's that old human tendency to be a slave to money rather than signing up for the
Yeah.
big adventure of having God as your boss.
Yeah.
Well, this brings us to the legal wins. What have we got?
Well, I like this one. This is, I mean, on one hand, it's not a win. On the other hand, it really is. And so Calgary pastor Derek Reimer, he has declared this week that he's willing to accept more jail time as a result of his refusal to write a letter of apology to a local librarian that he confronted 3 years ago during a protest against drag queen story time for children. One of the conditions of his house arrest was to write the librarian an apology letter. And he said something that he cannot do in good conscience. He said, I will not apologize to a library manager that's hosting drag queen story hour that grooms and sexualizes children. The library manager is the one who needs to apologize to the children, he said. So good for Derek Reimer for standing up, standing in his moral code, on his moral code. And he said, even if I go to jail, I will not concede. I will not apologize for, my behavior. It's his right and his responsibility to call this out. And so we need more Derek Reimers in the world.
Yeah, we sure do. I have great respect for him. And it's interesting how quickly that comes on the tails of discussing that very subject.
Yeah.
Who do you serve? Maybe that should be the song of the day. You got to serve somebody. And if it's the dollar bill, you have chosen a very low position in the universe, even if you've got a little computer that tells you you're a millionaire and you can eat at expensive restaurants. But this Pastor Derek Reimer, I think he knows who his master is. And I think that master is the one and only God. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, here's something. A district court judge issued a ruling last week banning a Texas-based prison from allowing male inmates who identify as women from entering any female-only privacy areas such as showers, bathrooms, and dormitories. So Judge Sidney Fitzwater sided with Rhonda Fleming and Miriam Crystal Herrera in his ruling. The women are inmates at the all-female Federal Medical Center Carswell in Fort Worth. And the two had filed a lawsuit challenging the policy. Fleming stated that it made her feel humiliated and degraded every day so that men that identify as women can be comfortable.
Well
Well,
said.
that's pretty important. It's hard to believe we're even discussing
Oh,
that,
again, it is.
that like I'm just imagining, let's say somebody is a real wicked freak and their big kick is raping women. So they get sent to jail and they're like, well, actually, I identify as a woman. So just send me to the female prison so I can head around into the women's showers and dorm. It's like it's hard, a 6 year old who hasn't been indoctrinated would have been able to make that call. But thank goodness that this judge is
Yeah.
also has the courage to stand up. We got something similar going on in Quebec, don't we?
Yeah, and so this was in the same article, it was in a LifeSite News article, and it said Quebec's Public Security Minister Francois Barnell announced that this past June, I missed it back then, that gender confused inmates would be sent to incarceration facilities based on their sex, not the gender they identify with. And he said the measure was necessary because safety must always come first for the benefit of the correction officer, our fellow citizens, and incarcerated people. So I wasn't aware that Quebec also has similar kinds of legislation. Good to see.
Yeah, yeah, it's unbelievable, Ted. The level of insanity they try to put in front of people, and we're all supposed to go, yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. So I'm grateful to see both Bonardel of Quebec and this Judge Fitzwater of Texas doing something
Yeah.
sane about it. Thank you, folks.
I'm gonna let you tackle this next one because it's a it's a good
Oh, oh my God. This one is loaded, folks. Get ready to cry or laugh, depending on how you like to go. I'm going to go with laughter. Anyways, Chara Watkin is a gender confused man who lied to another man about being a biological female when he performed sex acts with that man, and he's now been jailed for 21 months. The victim, I guess the fellow who had sex with the other guy there, the victim said he would not have consented to sexual activity if he had known he was a male. And the jurors found Watkin guilty of sexual assault, having sex as a woman when he was a man, I guess. The gender confused man must now register also as a sex offender. Ted, I want to let you have first shot at this punching bag.
Well, I mean I think this is pretty interesting. It's like so if you're going to lie about your biological sex, then you're going to be charged with as a sex offender. So I think that's very interesting. But I thought your comment about this one was pretty interesting, Mark. Why don't you share your
Well,
comment?
well, here's what I'm thinking. So there's two characters in this sexuality thing that happened between Chara Watkin and the other guy who's not mentioned, the victim. And I do support this action, but at the same time, I am predicting that the victim is also a victim of modern education, right? Because we know that we've been just talking about how they're indoctrinating kids in school to be completely confused about something real easy to tell a boy and a girl apart. Like that's real easy. That's not like needing to know the four chambers of the heart, right? But anyway, so I would assume or predict that the victim of this misidentified sexual encounter is recently educated because he had sex with somebody and who said they were female, and somehow he missed the evidence to the contraire, which makes me think this was some pretty promiscuous activity in an alley somewhere. I don't know. But folks, if it's got a handbrake, it ain't a girl. Let's make it simple.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Trozy. Yes.
Yes.
And here's, like we're in the same theme here. It just tells you how sick and sad things have gotten. But the win here is that a South Australian mother is taking the state government to court more than a year after her teenage daughter says she endured a diversity class that included references to bestiality and incest. And so Nikki Gaylard is suing the South Australian government with the help of an advocacy group, Alliance Defending Freedom International. She claims that her daughter was left deeply distressed. Her daughter was present during a session that was supposed to be about respectful relationships. And the woman's daughter claimed that the presentation was, in fact, included concepts like bestiality, brother love, sister love, sibling sex, and that the session also included explicit language and graphic images of transgender surgery. This is the kind of insanity that they're foisting upon a 14-year-old under the guise of respectful relationships. Boy, oh boy. I keep hoping that these people are exaggerating, but they're not. And that was my takeaway after the last NCI hearings. I heard so much disturbing information that I just thought, it can't be this bad, but it is. And so thankfully there's a mom here who said, this is unacceptable. You've actually abused my daughter, you've tormented my daughter, and I'm gonna take you to court. So good for her.
Yeah, as she well should. Ted, that's incredible. So a session on, quote, respectful relationships turns out to be a session about having sex with your brother, your sister, your dog.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I want to share some advice that I give to young people. And it's advice I give humbly because a lot of kids, like, where are they getting input to have a healthy relationship?
Yeah.
Like, Ted, you got a beautiful, wonderful wife. It adds so much to your life. Like, having a good relationship is a wonderful thing. We're created with that in our hearts, essentially. And yet, where are young people going to find? Well, okay, they go to school and they get proposed that a healthy relationship might be something between cutting off their genitals and having sex with a dog. So clearly, they're not going to get any help there, right? They go to the media and they learn that, even country music now, it's like get drunk and have sex with a stranger. That's not going to help you have a healthy life. It might help you get VD and a mental disorder. And so here's great advice that I give to people. Look for an old couple who are happy. Look for an old man and an old woman who love each other, where you go, wow, that's nice. And go and sit down with them. Bring your girlfriend or your boyfriend and go sit down and say, you know what, we'd love to have a good relationship. Will you give us some tips?
Mm,
That's where you're going to find the wisdom. Go
yeah.
find elders that have done it. And I think of friends like the Civics of mine, for instance. And, I think of Francis Christian and his family. I think of you and your relationship where, a chance to learn how people really, and because actually loving someone and being in love is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it's at the basic substrate of human society. And that's one of the reasons they want to destroy it, because they want to get rid of all organic organization so we can be reorganized like a bunch of rats in an AI run cage. So God bless this South Australian mother
Yeah.
for protecting your kid against being taught that bestiality is a meaningful relationship.
Got a couple items here under the medicine and health category, Mark. The first one is this is a cute one. So a young Ontario boy wrote to the Terry Fox Research Institute in Vancouver asking why they're not researching ivermectin and fenbizidol in cancer when places like Florida are. It's the innocence and the the bare truth of a young boy who is asking a great question. As much as I have a lot of respect for Terry Fox, I have to say that I don't have any confidence that these foundations are actually doing the work of wanting to prevent cancer. I too have come to the conclusion that these are money laundering organizations. I don't know whether that's being too hard, Mark, or not, but
No, no, unfortunately, it's completely true. And I mean that folks should have a look at that. We've put the link below on the Good Dr. Max's site, and you could read this young boy's letter and talk about out of the mouth of babes.
yeah,
Because he says, hey, we've been donating and raising money for years. How come you
yeah,
haven't cured cancer? And then there's these phenomenal treatments that are safe, effective, and cheap. And why are you doing nothing about it? And especially now, Ted. In fact, I just made a video that will be up on the Iron Wire Daily, just trying to give people some real straight from the gut information about cancer. Cancer's on the rise. Turbo cancer is like a whole new thing. It's from the COVID shots and the industry that gave the shots. And I'm talking, there are still oncologists telling people, yeah, make sure you take your COVID shot. You wouldn't want to get COVID while you're suffering with this strange cancer that's growing incredibly quick and isn't my treatments aren't working for. So this young boy is quite right. I got a feeling he's going to grow up to be a Ted Kuntz.
yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Well, here's something, and this goes back to John Alton's alert from last week. So, a memo from Dr. Vinny Prasad, who is the director of the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. It was released this week. And the memo is an admission that the COVID vaccines killed healthy kids. It also admits the FDA does not have reliable data estimating the absolute benefit, absolute risk reduction regarding severe disease and death in healthy children from the vaccine receipt. And folks, I've got some good info on that. It ain't good. The FDA has never requested the manufacturers demonstrate in randomized fashion that vaccinating children improves these outcomes. Keep in mind, these were genetic experiments, not really vaccines. And the truth is, we do not know if we saved lives on balance.
Yeah.
He's saying, yeah, we don't have evidence that it helped kids. I've presented evidence that increases the risk of COVID and 100 times in some cases of dying from UK data, right? And yet we're pushing it on kids. Anyways, Dr. Prasad says the truth is we do not know if we saved lives on balance. It also declared that no amount of COVID vaccines stop a person from getting COVID. Doesn't block transmission, doesn't block infection. Therefore, it's not really a vaccine. Another reason it's not a vaccine. But, anyways, Dr. Prasad continues. So the risk is not the virus versus the vaccine. It is the vaccine and the virus versus the virus alone. Very good point.
Yeah.
Kids are still going to get COVID, but if you give them the vaccine, they're going to get the vaccine and COVID. And actually,
Mm.
I'm involved in studies that show that that's even worse than just getting COVID alone by far. Ted, I've ranted a fair bit in the context of that. What are your thoughts about this item from Dr. Prasad?
Well, this is a truth bomb. This could easily have been one of the truth bombs today, is that for them to acknowledge that they don't have reliable data that actually demonstrates a healthy outcome. They've never requested that information from the manufacturers as part of the licensing process. And when he says the truth is we do not know if we save lives on balance. We had we had two testimonies at the NCI that are worth considering. This one is Dr. Mackes, of course, talked about the increase in cancers as a result of COVID vaccination. The other one was Bronwyn Hancock, who reviewed the data from the 2020 control group study that was done in the United States and concluded that the risk of severe disability and dying is higher for every vaccine on the childhood schedule than the risk of dying from not being vaccinated. And so let me say that again, is that if you're concerned about your child dying, vaccinating your child will increase the risk of their death, bottom line. And so that's such incredibly important information that I would say 99.9% of the public is not aware of.
And folks, I just have to stand behind what Ted's just said 100%. You can research this a lot of ways. I mentioned the UK data, which showed in some childhood groups the odds of a child being dead within 8 months of COVID so-called vaccination in some cases was more than 100 times. So imagine that. Say, here's a vaccine for your kid. Doesn't prevent COVID infection, doesn't prevent transmission, but unlike other kids, your child will have 100 times the risk that they'll be dead. And people say, well, I don't know that many kids that died. Yeah, it's true. Kids don't die much in modern society, but 100-fold increase in dying from COVID shots does tell a very
Yeah.
powerful story. And I'm going to make a point to put with this, because this fight to try to keep the needle out of the kids before it was stuck in them goes back. And Paul Alexander and I published an article back, and I'm going to reshare it here. This is 2021 article, Why Children Should Be Free and Never COVID Injected. And we go through the science in terms everyone can understand. And just to emphasize again is how rabid the medical, military, industrial complex was to get this genetic toxin into our children. This genetic toxin will shorten their life, destroy their health, and sterilize them relatively. That Dr. McCullough and approximately 30 other authors, including myself, penned a very detailed article called Treatment of COVID in Children. People would say, well, why would you have to treat COVID in children, Dr. Mark? I've been watching this. Kids don't get sick. They don't. But the point was, we wanted to show that if a kid ever did get really sick, which would be so rare, a healthy kid getting sick with COVID, very rare, but that there's treatments. And we mapped out in great detail. Imagine almost 30 authors working on this. And that got blocked from publication so intensely. And why was that?
Mhm.
Well, there ain't no treatment for COVID. So we got you all scared. Roll up that little kid's sleeve or pant leg and let's get that needle in him. So I'm glad to see Dr. Prasad bringing out this important evidence.
Yeah.
It's all been a lie.
Well, and again, Mark, the reason why they were so insistent on making sure that there was no treatment for COVID is They couldn't bring in a vaccine under emergency use authorization if there were effective treatments. And so they had to deny anything and everything in order to allow this experimental injection to be used. And so it clearly had nothing to do with what's in the best interest of the child. It's not what was most effective. It was we need to make sure that we are able to sell billions and billions of dollars worth of vaccines or what they call vaccines because this is again, this is a money laundering operation, period.
So true. Lies, lies, and more lies. Well, here's something out of the US. The US Department of Health and Human Services this week announced that Martin Kulldorff, PhD, a nationally recognized epidemiologist, biostatistician, former Harvard Medical School professor, he has been appointed Chief Science Officer for the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation. Kulldorff, who recently chaired the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, is widely known for co-authoring the Great Barrington Declaration, which was a critique of lockdown policies during the COVID-19 pandemic. The elevation of two great Barrington Declaration authors, which is, of course, Bhattacharya and now Kulldorff, to senior HHS roles marks an unprecedented moment in U.S. federal public health policy. It certainly does, Ted, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a real marker that says that those that were critical, rightly critical of the COVID pandemic measures have been elevated positions of authority and decision making in the United States. And so, boy, that recognizes a shift all by itself. So that's good to see.
Yeah, and it'd be nice to see that northern half of Turtle Island too. At the time of the Great Barrington Declaration, some of the great Canadian activists, including Dr. Francis Christian, and I was honored to sit at that table too, and drafted Canadian Physicians for Science, Declaration of Physicians for Science. And so wouldn't it be wonderful, to see people like Dr. Francis Christian back in control of the medical system here.
Yeah.
Let's hope that's where this goes next.
And Mark, this was a great win this week. When I wrote this, the result wasn't known yet. So this week on December the 4th and 5th, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices in the US goes by, the letters ACIP. They met to vote on a number of recommendations around vaccination, the vaccination schedule in the United States, which then is often adopted globally. And this meeting was specifically about the decision about whether to revoke the recommendation that every newborn receive the hepatitis B vaccine. And, the comment was that if the Hep B vaccine is removed, it will be a historic moment because it's extraordinarily rare for a vaccine to be removed from the CD schedule once it's on the schedule. Well, I heard just about an hour or so ago, Mark, that the ACIP committee did revoke the recommendation for newborns to receive the hepatitis B vaccine. So I don't have all the details yet. We'll probably report on this next week, Mark. But I think that's incredibly good to see. But the other part of this news is that, the media likes to make this out to be, oh my God, they're pulling their hair out. Children are going to die from hepatitis B because, so many infants are involved in, drug addiction and sexual activities that, when they're newborns, that without the Hep B vaccine, people are going to die. But here's a list of the other countries that do not have that on their childhood schedule. Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Japan, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, the UK, and in Canada, it's actually not part of the, well, we only have two provinces that actually have so-called vaccine mandates. That's Ontario and New Brunswick. And of course, that's for kids to go to school. It doesn't include hepatitis B vaccine in the first hours of life. But Mark, this is big news, isn't it?
Well, it sure is. And Ted, this hepatitis B issue shows how much the basically vaccine assault and imposition on mankind has advanced over the decades. Because I'm very familiar with hepatitis B. Hepatitis B, a viral infection of the liver. It's a disease you don't want to get. It can be transmitted through blood products like a blood transfusion. It can be transmitted by sharing needles like drug users might do. And it can be transmitted through sexual intercourse. And if you go back 20 years, Ted, as an emergency doctor, because I would be licensed and I would perform certain surgical procedures, I was actually required to maintain hepatitis B immunity, which, of course, that's a whole other
Yeah.
discussion whether or not that works, even for a blood-borne disease. But so, how did this go from a vaccine that would be recommended for people who have particular exposure, like surgeons, or people that have to be on blood products like hemophilics? How did it go from that to giving it to newborn babies?
Yeah.
And so it is it is a hallelujah moment seeing this long overdue revocation of hepatitis B from the childhood schedule in the USA. And may it be the first of many as we go back to science and human rights.
Now, I think what we're going to see this week, Mark, is we're going to see quite a performance of the sky is falling, the sky is falling. So be prepared for, a whole lot of mainstream media and pharma controlled doctors, prostitutes to be calling this out as just terrible. So that should be some entertainment this week.
Well, Ted, what you said is so important, and it very much segues into our first item under telling it like it is. Because I've been looking at this a lot, Ted, the great lie of COVID. So
Mm.
the lie was hundreds of millions of people were going to die from COVID. And now what we're seeing is some people are defending the so-called vaccines, the genetic poison forced again into people's bodies that, killed how many so far? We don't know. 30 million, 40 million, growing, cancers. There's a lot going on. But you'll still see people like, Blumenthal there in the Senate saying, well, we have to remember the COVID vaccine saved lives. And so part of the lie is, everybody was going to die, and they would have if it hadn't been for the vaccine. And folks, you have to be very careful of not letting them write the history of it that way. And
Right.
that's exactly what Ted's pointing out. They're going to try to say, oh my God, hepatitis is going to come back and start killing babies. It's a lie.
Yeah.
But anyways, James Corbett, who is a writer I've enjoyed for decades now, he wrote on this subject this: history as we know it is written by the winners. So if the WH goons and their string pullers and paymasters win, then our grandchildren will grow up learning about the terrible plague that threatened to wipe out the global population in 2020. They'll read about how some crazy kooks resisted the loving lockdowns of the government and warned against the life-saving vaccines. And they'll truly believe we were only saved by the skin of our teeth thanks to our benevolent masters imposing lockdowns, mRNA clot shots, and masks on all of us. This is why spreading the truth about these events is so vital. We must not let the lies stand, because if these lies are written into the history books, then the conspirators really have won. Such a good warning from James Corbett.
Absolutely. And you know what? Unfortunately, this is already true in some sectors. Like in our universities now is where, and they've been teaching this for like 10 years, unbeknownst to most of us, about, the gender fluidity and transgenderism and all of that nonsense. And the same with this whole, carbon equals the end of humanity because carbon's going to kill us. I've got a nephew and a niece who they're young adults and they've been taught this insanity as part of their education and they're looking at the adults in their life like their father and mother and myself and thinking that we're the crazy ones. And that's the problem is that when the bad guys get to be in charge of the education system, we're in big trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, and when lies are allowed to stand, and I mean, let's face it, I mean, the entry of the US into the Vietnam War,
Yeah.
September, there's a lot of stuff where they've hung on to these lies even though the evidence is massive, and that's the reason more and more people need to learn how to think again,
Yeah.
how to use critical reasoning, how to look at the facts. And speaking of people looking at facts, and one of the great Canadians who helps people take off the blinders and see reality is Jason Christoff. And he wrote something we'd love to talk about this week about algorithms. And this is what Jason Christoff wrote. If you post about things that don't matter, the algorithms will purposely drive your post into the stratosphere in order that you get emotionally rewarded for staying inside your own caged area of futility. As long as you're a perpetual non threat to the system, you'll get rewarded on social media. You'll also get lots of algorithm likes, comments, and shares if you help divide people and make sure people keep hating each other instead of focusing on the one common enemy who will destroy all of us. Over the couple last months, my posts are becoming more and more censored. They don't want the public staying connected to any free thinkers who know the design of the system in general and who can guide people out of the cabal's next fake fear and panic based psychological ambush. And that comes, of course, from Canada's expert in how to live and psychological mind control, Jason Christoff. I recommend folks follow him. Ted, what do you think about this?
Well, I like what he's saying, or at least I agree with him, is that if you stay in a safe area, if you talk about stuff on social media that really is meaningless, the algorithms will support you. You know, you see all kinds of social media posts about dogs and cats and, all kinds of things that is lovely, but we're in a war here. And if you talk about the war, if you use the word vaccine, like we've been booted off YouTube and those kinds of platforms at Vaccine Choice Canada because we use the word vaccine. Doesn't matter how you use it, just having the word somewhere within your message has you deleted, has you censored. And so he's just pointing out the obvious here that if you're getting lots of likes, it may be that it's because you're not saying anything that's important.
That's so true, Ted. And it's interesting how what common people are experiencing in social media, what the layperson experiences, parallels what scientists have been experiencing in medical science
Right.
and scientific publications over the last 5 years. Because you could publish drivel about COVID as long as it supported the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's a
if you
good point.
published real good science that stated otherwise, you got pushed out of
Yeah.
peer review or had your
R-
paper retracted. So,
Yeah.
it's the same agenda of mind control across many platforms.
Yeah. Here's one, Mark. A massive new study has confirmed that what many parents feared. Now, this is again your good news, bad news kind of story. The heavy-handed lockdowns and social distancing policies of the COVID-19 era inflicted measurable and lasting developmental harm on an entire generation of young children. Research from the University of Edinburgh, the largest of its kind in Europe, delivers a sobering verdict on the real cost of pandemic restrictions, revealing a significant increase in developmental concerns amongst toddlers that persisted even after the rules were lifted. The evidence exposes the profound consequences of policies that prioritized a single health metric over the holistic well being of society's most vulnerable. This landmark study serves as a damning indictment of the lockdown ideology. It provides irrefutable evidence that the collective mental and developmental health of our children was sacrificed, creating a legacy of needless struggle for the youngest members of our society. We must now confront the full scope of the harm caused and ensure that the rights and needs of children are never again so carelessly discarded in the name of public health. That's a pretty good truth bomb, I would say.
Well, it sure is, Ted. And it reminds me of a thought that's been on my mind quite a bit lately, which is what is a parent's role? What is a grandparent's role, for instance? Right? And in a healthy society, a really nice grandparent is one who watches over the children while the parent goes to work or takes them to activities and helps them. You know, putting some effort into your grandchildren is a very important thing. And right now, we're in a war
Yeah.
and the children are the target. And so I know a lot of folks prefer to argue or fight for their favorite hockey team or, wear a t-shirt and go like raise beer and shout about winning the hockey game. And I'm not trying to knock sports and all this stuff, but to see grown people during a war where their own descendants are being euthanized and enslaved, completely absent from the field, pretending that life's fine and it's all normal and it's all about just going and watching the soccer game or whatever. I think that it's, as Ryan Penn said, and touched me, he said, you can only hit the snooze button so many times before you wake up. But how long are you going to lay in bed awake before you stand up? And,
Mm,
folks, it's definitely time to stand up. And I know we're preaching to the choir here, folks, but just reinforcing you to keep up your activism
yeah.
and defending the future. Well, we got one more little telling it like it is here. Linda Englander wrote this. No matter how we delude ourselves into thinking this is a free country, what we really have is a totalitarian government that flexes power against us at will, and there is no way for us to stop it. I don't fully agree, but I think it's an important statement. Ted, what do you think?
Well, I think we have to be careful about deluding ourselves thinking that we're living in a democracy or that we're living in a legitimate that we have legitimate government. And you've mentioned this a number of times, Mark. Whenever we use the phrase our government, my government, you say, well, that's not my government, that's not our government. And Bruce Pardy, I think, spoke this really well when he said there's two kinds of Canada. There's the one that's in our hearts and our minds about what we thought this country was or wanted it to be. And then there's the reality about what it is. And what it is actually a government of tyranny. I'm with you is that I don't agree with the final part of Linda's message where she said, and there's no way for us to stop it. There absolutely is. And you just mentioned it in your previous comments. We have to stand up. We have to defend our rights and freedoms. Nobody can do that for us. We have to refuse to comply. Will it be uncomfortable? Might we be punished? Might we actually be killed? Yes, to all of those things. But I'd rather be killed standing up than be killed sitting in front of a TV playing video games. So,
Yeah, amen to that. Well, Ted, we got some inspirational words of wisdom to share this week from a unexpected source. Can you tell us more about this?
well, it was just somebody shared this with me, and I thought it actually like acknowledged the shift, I think. So Chevrolet, which is the car company, launched its Christmas ad campaign, and it was a beautiful commercial that highlights what they called the messiness of raising kids while championing the value of having a family. And so the ad was titled Memory Lane, reflecting on the ups and downs of family life. And in the ad, the wife turns to the husband and says, speaking about the kids, they never made it easy, did they? And the husband replies, did you want it to be easy? And she said, no, I wanted it to be just the way it was. And I think those are beautiful words. And then this was written up in LifeSite News, and Matt commented about, he said, they're celebrating Christmas with both of their children. One of the kids didn't avoid Christmas because dad voted for Trump or because mom held strongly held religious beliefs. The entire family, not just those who perfectly agreed with each other, were together for the holidays. In fact, this is one of the ways that we honor our father and our mother by getting together over the holidays and having family gatherings. And I just thought that was a beautiful message.
Oh, that is a wonderful message. And I guess it's true. We're into December, this Christmas season approaching. And I'd like to admonish folks to remember that the meaning of Christmas isn't greed. The meaning of Christmas isn't the big long list of stuff that everybody expects and wins and getting out your credit card, getting down to the store, buying a bunch of plastic stuff and stuff that's going to end up in a landfill down the road and just making sure there's lots of consumerism going on in the name of Santa Claus. But this is supposed to be about love and about the teachings of Christ. And I've been very much inspired by the youngest member of my closest family recently who said, I'm going to make gifts this year for people. And folks, it ain't about money. That should be very clear. I mean, Christ said himself, you can serve God or you can serve money, but you can't serve them both. So let's let this Christmas be about love and God and family and not about the pressure to fulfill everybody's greedy little needs, to have all the stuff they're programmed to want between TV and the social media.
Well said, Mark.
What are our calls to actions this week, Ted?
Well, there's two actions that I'd like our audience to participate in. One is that in the December edition of Druthers, Vincent Gersey, who's a retired Ontario police officer, he's also a commissioner with the National Citizens Inquiry. He wrote a very good article about the consequences of the Helen Cruz decision on policing in Canada. And it really is a message from one police officer, former police officer, to another. And the call to action is that we ask people to hand deliver a December edition of the Druthers newspaper to every police officer they see over the month of December. And so Vincent's article is on page 3. And so what we invite people to do is open up the newspaper, fold it to page 3, and hand it to a police officer saying, this message is for you. I'd like you to read it. And do it very lovingly, do it very respectfully. But it speaks, like I said, the language of law enforcement. And Vincent reminds them of what their oath is. And I think it's a very, very well done article.
That's a great call to action. I highly
Yeah.
recommend folks jump in on that one.
And then the second one is we talked about this documentary that was done by Dallas Brody and the 1BC party here in British Columbia called Making a Killing, Reconciliation, Genocide, and the Plunder of Canada. I invite everybody to watch it. It's about an hour and 20 minutes long. It's a very well done, interesting documentary, very informative. But not only watch it, I'd like you to share it with somebody. Give it to somebody and saying, I'd like you to watch this. I think it's important for the future of Canada that you know what the truth is. And so those are our two calls to action this week, Mark.
Well, those are both excellent calls. Ted, society's got to be based on truth. And if it's based on anything other than the truth, then it's got no future. It's built on sand. So thanks for those calls to action. Ted, that brings us to the end of this week's wins. Folks, there's a whole bunch more wins to learn about, and they will be found in the comments section because every week a lot of our great followers and participators leave great comments there. So we're looking forward to seeing your comments. Please click the like button if you enjoyed this. Please have an incredibly healthy, active, victorious week. Continue what you're doing to help win the war for the world for the good guys. Maybe we'll all take a little bit of inspiration from Hillary and get those weights out or that yoga mat out and get some fitness in. I love the idea that Hillary's working out as she's watching this. And we will now attempt to leave you with a beautiful song to hopefully lift your spirits, empower you, and help you have a great workout, whether you're doing yoga or pumping the iron.
Mark, good to spend this time with you again. Nice to celebrate the wins. It just gives us some fuel to do even more next week.
Thanks, Ted. Big hugs from Ontario all the way to BC.
Thank you, and back again.